Loud. I like doing that. Okay, so we are going to talk through some more jobs that are available for CHW. Rob here. Aaron, you want to say hi?
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm a career advisor in the Career Center.
So we're going to keep doing some of these over the summer, and these are some recent jobs that Aaron's found out there as he's doing a search. And what's interesting about this search, as we'll get into it, is Aaron really started to look at some of the sub-disciplines. CHW itself, community health worker, that that really is, I'm sure you've started to see, has a lot of possible career paths. It oftentimes lends itself to working in a lot of different patient-facing disciplines where there's an activity that's involved where somebody is providing information to the patient and or collecting information from the patient and then helping that individual to find the right service. You'll probably also find some options that are out there that are kind of looking at service provider facing with the idea of helping service providers to understand what the community needs are and how they might better work together to collaborate. So what we're looking at here is diving into one of those subfields that Aaron looked up, and it's this. Do you want to? It's
Yeah,
the community integrated living arrangement provider. Do you want to just talk a little bit about why you decided to look at this field?
sure. So this is when I was young and I was in college, it was one of the roles that I performed while I was working through school. And the Scylla Homes are amazing organizations that support people with intellectual disabilities, typically. So they may have autism on the spectrum. They may have other issues. They could be disabled adults where they were maybe have blindness or other conditions like that. But the community integrated living arrangement situation is where you'll have an apartment complex or like a group home where all these people are living together, and what you're doing is going in there and supporting them, right? And a lot of it is teaching, right? So there's not, like when I was in the Scylla home, my home had schizophrenics, right? And what I would do is one, make sure that at their time they took their medications, right? So I had the box and I had them all lined up, and I knew who had to take medications at certain times. If they had an inhaler or any of those things, I made sure that they took them at those times. After that, what I did is I taught them. I taught them independent living. So it was giving them prompts and taking them and say, hey, George, today's your laundry day. Get all your laundry together and we're going to the laundry room, right? And when we got to the laundry room, I'd talk them through it and say, how much soap do you put in? Where do we turn the dials? And it would be really trying to teach them how to become independent so that they could live as independently as possible, but under supervision, right? So these have there's a whole bunch of them. They're across the state. I think there's close to 100 to 200
Yeah.
organizations
What I'll
that,
just
that
bring up
provide the
here is
service.
the list that you shared, Aaron. So
Yeah.
there's this state website, DHS, Department of Health Services, or Human Services, and on it you can see all of these agencies. It has the phone number. I would say do a Google, copy it, paste it in, and this could be a really interesting way of looking to see what's available in this field. The interesting thing that we've seen, and we'll go through it a little bit here, is a lot of these positions are flexible. A lot are part-time, and as a lot of our CHW students, completers now, are thinking about, how their career starts here, it might involve piecing together a couple of part-time gigs. I know that a few of the AmeriCorps opportunities were part-time, so the idea is what would I do with some of that additional time that I have in order to make enough money to make my budget work. These roles are kind of a perfect fit for that. And as I tried to convey in the email that I sent to everybody too, it's also just a great way of diving into a very large subset of healthcare support. Um, all of these providers being in Illinois, and most of them being Cook County around Chicago, just goes to show, and I'm sure so many of you already know this, how many individuals utilize supports like this.
Mhm.
And if your ability to triage individuals in our community and family members even of theirs into services like this, you could definitely be a pretty big value add to an organization by having had some in-depth experience doing this work.
Yeah. So for instance, like my role, which is the 608 house in Carbondale, I worked one 24-hour shift a week. So I showed up at 4 o'clock on Friday and I got off at 4 o'clock on Saturday. And, you know, a lot of the time was, what do you guys want to do tonight? Oh, we want to have popcorn and watch a movie. Okay. So, you know, it was great because they had air conditioning and they had cable TV, which was two things that I didn't have as a, you know, starving college student. So it was great to go there. And the only requirement was that you stayed up in case there was an emergency, right? So, you know, I would sit out front and, you know, you could doze a little bit, but, you know, they even had a bed for people to lay down if they needed to. But then, you know, you got up at the morning an hour before everybody else and made sure everybody else got up in time and helped them walk through the cooking of breakfast. And, you know, some of these individuals were able to do outpatient. So they would just sign out and then you say, see ya, you got to be back here at 9 o'clock at night, and they'd be gone, right? But I would play chess with them, play checkers with them, play board games, cards, whatever it is that the individuals wanted to do, you know, to be active. You just had to make sure that whoever had the chores to be done got their chores done. So it was a really great job for somebody working with college and working and learning to work with different populations, right? And sure. I was able to work with schizophrenics, which was an amazing experience to learn a lot and spend a lot of time with people that suffer from that illness.
Yeah, and you know, as you're describing that, Aaron, I think a great example that you can share from these kinds of experiences in an interview for a position that might be a little bit higher up the career path is, you know, what is it like working with a population that oftentimes faces stigma? And how do you help destigmatize individuals that are, you know, suffering from various disorders that help them to still participate in a way that they're happy, and helping the service providers that they engage with to be able to elicit out the details they need to provide effective services for somebody that's in that group. And having the direct experience working with an individual who may be schizophrenic, as your example there, Aaron, is, you know, that's a totally transferable skill for humility that goes across many different populations that experience stigma. So I, you know, as a lot of you have interacted with Aaron in the past, you know, I'm sure that you can tell that he's just a very good listener, and, you know, he's an easy person to be around. And I suspect that he developed a lot of those skill sets in working with, you know, those groups of individuals at this home. So let's go into a few of the postings here, Aaron. You know, as we talk about them, we'll see that they're not all uniform. So there's, you know, different aspects to each that might be more interesting. So I'm going to first go into this one with the Pilsen Wellness Center that you shared out. Mm-hmm. So this one, as you can see right there in the top bar, part-time. So it can definitely work as a combination job. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here because I see the text is kind of small. So it starts off by telling you what the organization does, and then, you know, it's talking about mental health, substance abuse, youth services, early intervention. Here's the role itself. The individual will contribute to the implementation of the participant service plans, specifically designed to increase the participant's skills in independent daily living, independent economic self-sufficiency, and community integration, reintegration. I mean, as I'm reading through right there, I mean, this is where the community health worker field, that this skill that you'll be developing, both, you know, that makes you qualified for the role, but you'll be continuing to develop in the role, that's going to be huge for getting career progression moving forward. These integration, reintegration services may include an array of services and interventions designed to provide treatment, habitation training, and other integration services. So the role is weekends, Saturday and Sunday, evening shift, 3 to 11 p.m. So if you're looking to have flexibility during the week, this can be something that fits into that schedule pretty well. When we're looking at the qualification skills, must have a high school diploma and or 2 to 5 years experience in the mental health field. So,
and though that said, it says and or. So
sure.
I have my high school diploma. You know, I don't have the 2 to 5 years experience necessarily working with mental health, but that's okay because I have the one then the other, right? And you could always sell a little bit of the mental health experience, right? In other ways.
And also on here, you can say that bilingual Spanish is preferred.
Mm-hmm.
So in that too, if you're somebody who is bilingual in Spanish and English, I could see that being a really good sell for this, that you could pretty quickly be able to get the interview for this role because of that.
I would imagine that, because of this being in Pilsen neighborhood, that the majority of your clients would be, native Spanish speakers,
Sure.
maybe. And that's why it's on here. So, but if you like the description, I think we could find this type of role in other communities as well, right? Because I think I found one in Austin that does the same thing if you're on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some other agencies that do this work in other communities.
Yeah, let's take a look at another role that you had found, and this one's there's actually a couple of roles with Ray Graham Association, and there's some that are direct service, and then there's actually one that's a team leader in doing that.
Yeah.
Um, it,
And
it
I think this was kind of on the west side of Chicago, right? If I
Yeah, there's
remember
one
the
that's West
locations.
Chicago, and then there's one that's west of West Chicago over in Elmhurst.
Yeah, and I just didn't know, if West Chicago was close enough. I just figured I'd put it on here so that people could, determine for themselves if it was a good fit or not, right?
Let's take a quick look at this direct support professional, because I think that's going to be a little bit closer to what we had just looked at before. So a pretty short job description, if I've ever seen one, responsible for providing direct support and supervision. And then it goes into here with the qualifications, again, talking right away with the high school, but then going into experience working with individuals with developmental disabilities, oral, written communication, and then right here, must be able to meet healthcare worker background check. So it'll be nice to know that you'll be able to, have passed that. Oftentimes when you're applying for a job and they know that you've already been in a field that does background checks, it kind of becomes a little bit easier too, because they just kind of default to saying like you're probably good. The only thing that I've noticed in these ones is likely you need to have a driver's license for this.
And when you think about it, a lot of times you may, on your shift, have to drive the house to the grocery store, and everybody shops, right? And everybody has their budget, and you help people budget their money so that they could buy their snacks or their chips or cigarettes or whatever it is, that the client is going to buy. So, or it may just be a recreational activity where you're going to take people to a restaurant one night, right? And you're all going to sit down at a restaurant at a table and have dinner, and you're going to kind of mentor them and coach them through, proper behavior in that environment, right? So, I did find that a lot of them do ask for the driver's license or a clean driving record. Yes.
Now let's take a look, because in these roles, and I'm sure many of you are probably, as you're watching this, saying, I've kind of done this work before, or I got the CHW cert. I'm looking for the next level up, and that's where an opportunity like this in a larger organization, this might give you an opportunity for that growth. So let's look at the team leader position. So this is kind of like the next level up. This has got a lot of things that are, on the job description. The previous one we looked at, job description was like this, and now we're looking at a job description that's like this. And this is, to me, an example of like that career progression that you can get in a field like this that has so many, I'm just going to click over to the long laundry list here. All of these organizations likely have a role. I have to go back to
that's like a house manager, right? Or a facility manager, where you're supervising all the people that are doing the direct service provider role and supporting the team from the leadership thing. So you're doing a little scheduling, you would troubleshoot if anybody has any issues to make sure things get resolved for the clients. This is definitely the next level of experience in this type of role, if you like this work in supporting this community.
Yeah, and I know so many of the completers that we've spoken to have previous supervision experience. So the idea of this is this is partly why I like the part-time work too, if you can do it. And the part-time work is really a great trial run for you to see if you like the organization, and then you say to yourself, okay, well now what can I apply to, as far as that career progression up. that utilizes my past experiences. So, if you have had supervision experience and you've worked with this population before, I might even say just start off by applying to this team leader role. And when I see a job description that's got all this stuff on here, I say this is great for me being able to say this is all the work that I did a year from now when I'm looking to apply for even a higher level position that pays better.
Right. And I mean, even when you look at some of the descriptions in here where it talking about petty cash and turning in receipts and attendance, if you've done any kind of cashiering in the past, there's your tie, right? So you could tie yourself to having a lot of these different experiences in a lot of different ways. So, just because you didn't have it in this type of environment, you still have had experiences doing and perfecting some of these skills.
Let's talk about a cover letter that kind of looks at this leadership type position. What do you think?
Before we do that, also, I just want to see what's the requirements for this? Like, as far as, are they asking for a higher credential now that we have all these details?
It's saying prefer an individual with CNA training, but it's still not saying that it's a requirement. So to me, I think that this is where you can really talk about the CHW cert, and then also any experience that you had with clinicals before that unfortunately had to slow down, or previous work experience in the healthcare field in general.
Yeah, cool. So that's great that this one, sometimes when you see some of these house managers, I do want to see a little bit of possibly a bachelor's degree in a social services agency or social services field, possibly, but this one doesn't. So that's amazing. That's awesome.
So what are some things that you think in a cover letter when we're talking about, this position itself, there's a ton of stuff on here. So before we've talked about kind of picking a menu. So you would go through here and, the bulleted items that you've done in the past might be great things to highlight in the cover letter. But Aaron, let's talk about just in general, when you're applying to a role that supervises others, what's some good things to include in a cover letter?
Well, obviously, if you had that same thing in a retail or other type of setting, you want to talk about your supervisory experience. Doing documentation for payroll, doing scheduling, things of that nature. So to show that, and even to the point where if you in your role trained new employees on the policies and procedures of the role, because in a supervisory situation, you're going to be training people and talking to them about the policies and procedures of a DSP role for them. So anytime that you've trained others, it would be great because, I see problem solving. I mean, there's so much, Rob, to pull out of here that we could possibly talk about,
Well, when you're talking about supervisory, I mean, this might be into that, regard of like, how do you get the most out of others?
Right,
trying to write a cover letter, and it just ties a little bit into the training too. How is it that you get a team, and it might not necessarily just be a team that reports to you, but a team that you work within? How do you make the team work better together for the benefit of the clients?
Yeah. I even see some stuff about going above and beyond and finding coverage for open shifts and call offs. And wow. I mean, this has got a lot of responsibility in this role. There is a ton of responsibility for people to adhere to and to be paying attention to. But so like bringing the most out of teammates, motivating others. So give me an example of a time when you had to motivate others to accomplish a goal, kind of thing, right? Because I think there's a lot of that in this position, and even in the direct service provider role, as far as motivating, sometimes clients that you work with may not be as motivated as you are to get the chores done. Sure. So sometimes you have to be kind of convincing to finagle some of that to happen. So, but I mean, I even a lot of times working with kids, if you have kids or you've worked with little kids, and that kind of job opportunities, that could be a way to tie some of that in here too, because convincing kids to do their chores is not much different than convincing some adults to do their chores.
Sure. One thing I'm thinking of here that ties in so much to a lot of what the CHW students have recently done is when you're managing a team, and especially when you're managing entry-level staff, part of it is, acknowledging that for them, this isn't going to be the end point of their career, and they're looking to grow themselves. And if you yourself have recently taken on the initiative to upskill, you have the ability to, develop a rapport with somebody that is entry level and saying, let's talk about what it is that you need in order to feel that you're gaining from this position so that your career is moving up by being part of it. And as you're working within a team of doing that, part of it is helping to identify tasks that that person likes to do more than other individuals, and helping to right size positions based on people's passions, and then just also what they're comfortable with doing.
Yeah, could you scroll down just a little bit on the job description, please?
Sure.
There's something down here that I I was just reading about, attending the weekly meetings with the QIDP and the program managers and coordinators. That's, the cool thing about doing those types of things is those are going to be client-based discussions and some house-based discussions. So you're really going to learn a lot of in-depth knowledge of your clients medically and also psychologically, right? So you may understand certain nuances from clients that may have a pattern of behavior that the counselors working with them are trying to stop, right? And trying to kind of encourage them not to do those things anymore. And part of your role is to observe, monitor, right? So if I did security in the past, I could talk about monitoring and observing a work environment for any small nuances or changes, and effectively communicating and reporting those to supervisors and leadership on a timely basis. So that may be something where you could tie other past experiences into this type of situation. But again, I think it's really cool because that was one of the things that was the neatest part of this role when I was doing it, was learning, and then being able to observe the clients and seeing the things that the counselors and the people that were supporting them in other ways were talking about, and seeing it come to fruition. You're like, oh my gosh, now I see what you're talking about. And I think the coolest thing, Rob, about these roles and working with these populations is you realize very quickly that people with schizophrenia, people with autism, people with developmental disabilities are no different than anybody else in this world, right? They're just people too that are just trying to get a quality of life. And that's what we're there to do, is ensure that these people have a quality of life that makes them a happy person in this world. And I love these organizations, and I love supporting them and working for them. I think it's great stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it's a great platform to understand and learn a lot of new things that you may not be aware of yet.
So let's jump back into some of the positions here, because I know this next one is a little bit different. We're talking about out of school time activity worker. So what is that going to tell you?
Metropolitan Family Services was actually on a list of SILA providers. So I actually just went to their job board and started looking around, right? And that's where I found this opportunity, which was a little bit different, like you said, from the other things. But if you want to work with kids, this may be something that you would be interested in doing. I mean, this thing was posted a long time ago, and it's part-time, so I don't know if, what the deal is with it. But
so when you find a position that's part-time, the first thing I would say to do with it is you don't go and apply to that role. Sometimes in your search, you'll find an older job posting, but it can be what you use to find the more recent one. Sometimes it'll be on an older job board, so you will actually go to like the provider like we have here. And then other times, just use it and then go to the section that's actually finding the opportunities, like here. And you can take a look at some of the things that are more current, that are part of the role. So this one auto starts to go with newest, and you can kind of scroll down to see what's there. But let's take a look at the role.
Yeah. And I like Metropolitan Family Services. I know some of the students that I've worked with in the past that have graduated, got their bachelor's degrees, and are working for Metropolitan Family Services. So They're a good organization, it seems like, and they're doing a lot of good in the community. So it seems like they're a good employer is what I'm getting at, right? So I would imagine if you looked at their job board, you might find other roles that are closely aligned to community healthcare workers as well, not just this position. So I think this would be an organization that I would keep on my bookmarks, that every week I would go in there and take a look at what kind of things they have that are new and see if there's anything that I would consider applying to.
Yeah, and I've got this part highlighted here because this to me screams community health worker, with the ability to work collaboratively with school personnel, agency staff, parents, community partners. It's all about operating within an ecosystem. So when you see that an organization is looking for that, that should actually be a plus sign for you thinking about going to work there. Ideally, you're looking to work with an organization that collaborates a lot with other organizations. Two reasons on that. The first is for your benefit, because you're going to be developing a lot larger network of contacts, because that's going to be who you're triaging people, in between. And then the second reason, I just mentioned it, triaging, is organizations that tap into the community. It's a lot easier for you to have support. So it's not just on the one care provider to support the population. It's understood that oftentimes you'll be saying, well, this individual needs support in substance abuse. So we know that we, have a contact over with this organization that, maybe even comes to our site every other week to talk to clients.
And so the other thing is, if I was applying for this in any of the jobs, if I've ever had a mandated reporter training, I would definitely include that on my resume somewhere, because in all these roles, whether you're working in the Scylla homes or doing this activity worker with youth, you will be a mandated reporter for abusive situations. So that may be some things that you can include. So if you've done that at a nursing home while you were working there, or if you've done that while in a school or other places, that would be something I would consider. I wouldn't consider. It's a must to put that onto your resume, saying that you understand those laws and regulations of this role. And if you see those things, you will properly communicate that to the authorities.
Yeah, and that's a great interview question to prep for too. The question is, what happens when, somebody discloses to you a situation that is putting themselves or others in danger? How do you report it? And a lot of organizations will probably ask that as a way of validating that you understand what it means to be a mandatory reporter. Let's take a look. We've got a couple more. I wanted to take a look at this Envision one because it's got a lot of positions. I just wrote multiple positions on it, and when we have it come up, you'll see why. So these are just alphabetical, not by posting, but you can take a look. There's just a laundry list of positions that are potentially on here. Aaron, were you thinking maybe like a community living specialist might be a good one?
Yeah, that's the kind of one. But I mean, obviously, like you said, this one shows some good potential for growth. I mean, even like the little activity aid, right? I mean, that's doing therapeutic recreational things with individuals. So it could be art, it could be, sing-alongs, at Christmas time and doing Christmas carol. It could be a lot of different things, right? But I think there could be some, even like an assistant director eventually could be a role that somebody, I think when you start looking at the ones that say a therapist, you're going to need higher stuff, but there's a mental health DSP down there, part-time right there, right?
I'm looking at this outreach and engagement specialist myself.
Front door diversion project, I've seen a couple of those outreach positions that do ask for a bachelor's degree. So, but even part-time housing and benefits specialist, right? And going through and making sure that client is connected to all the resources that they could possibly be available to receive, right? So there's a whole host of things within, I think, this organization.
Yeah, and that's where, when you're looking at a gig like this too, I'm sorry, it looks like I'm chopping a little bit. When you look at an opportunity,
are we waiting for Envision to open up?
Can you hear me right now? There we go. My internet connection was chopping.
No, I heard you all along.
What I was going to say is, when you look at an organization like this that has so many roles, this then becomes a really good one to start looking up some people that work there on LinkedIn, seeing what their path has been, seeing the type of education that they've pursued, and then that can be, a template for you to follow. That, if you just start off by being an activity aide part-time initially, you can see what it takes in order to become an assistant director of clinical services. Okay, so last one that we have on here is developmental disabilities, DSP. So we've talked a lot about these DSPs before. Let's just open up another position to dive in.
So like with the mental health ones, you're going to probably deal with people that have some kind of psychological diagnosis. With these, it's really more developmentally disabled. So when I was working at another place and when I was younger, I had two individuals that were blind, and then they had other issues as well. One young lady had really bad cerebral palsy, and she was restricted to a wheelchair. And the one young man was a fetal alcohol baby, so he never really developed physically. So his eyes never developed, so he couldn't see, and he would just support them right through the thing. So I had the overnight shift, which is great because when I got there, they were already in bed. I got to sleep, and in the morning I got up an hour before them. I fixed them all breakfast, got them all dressed, and then they went to their day provider, where they went to their day activity thing. So the van would come up, pick them all up, and I would sit there and write down all my case notes. And then about a half hour after doing my case notes, I'd go home. And it was a really, really cool job. And again, just like working with everybody else, it's really awesome to work with people that have had these severe deficiencies, because you really understand that they're just like everybody else. They just need a little bit of understanding, a little bit of help, and then you see them smile, right? And you could tell that they're enjoying themselves, and that's really the reward. Because a lot of my clients in this situation were not verbal. They could not say any words at all, and all you had was ums, ahs, and smiles. So it was fascinating. I loved it. I mean, working with people with developmental disabilities is great. It takes patience, though, lots of patience.
The thing that I've seen in a lot of these positions is talk about medications. When you're a CHW in the field, I've heard a lot of terms used for this, and the idea is that people are on just so many medications now. Like sometimes they'll use the term polypharmacy. It's the idea that people are, the interaction between drugs is as much, important as the correct dosage of a drug now, and understanding how things play off of each other. When you're applying to a role and you've gotten that experience in the past, I just think it's a really interesting skill set to talk about, just because so many of us are now on regimens of, really daily medication in order, proactively stay out in front of health concerns.
Yeah, no, and it's really important, obviously, when you're working with these clients, that they're taking all their medications timely, and doing it correctly. So like one young lady I had a breathing treatment where she had to put the mask on, but you had to monitor her the whole time, because she would be smart about it, and she'd stick her finger in here like this underneath the mask so that she didn't have to breathe in the stuff, because it probably tasted bad, right? Yeah. Or whatever. And so I'd have to sit next to her the whole time and just watch her for like the 10 minutes as she was doing her breathing thing, just so that she can go through the process. Because her mental capacity was probably just, this tastes bad, I don't want to do it.
Yep.
And didn't understand the positive benefits of her doing it correctly, right? So yeah, if you've done anything with medications or monitored patients with medication things, whether it is a home health aide kind of situation or CNA, that would be great.
Yeah, it just talks about CPR. So in a role like this, of course, you'd want to make sure that your resume has listed, your active CPR training, just to make sure that they're aware that you have all this. A role like this one, it's so much about compassion, and I think that, as Aaron's talking about his experience doing it, it's so good to have developed that skill set working with a population, like the ones that we've discussed today. So, and also just, I totally appreciate too that, it is stressful, to work with individuals that need your support more than you might be used to. So a part-time role like this, it's something that, Aaron does it for a day a week kind of thing. That's where it might be a good, as I mentioned before, combination position to do with a role that you might be developing, different skills in. Or it might just be you're partnering it with a role that pays a little bit more, but isn't in the healthcare field, so that you're able to keep developing these skills that employers are looking for, as I'm just going to keep hammering it home, for that career growth. When you're looking at a role that maybe requires 5 years of experience, this counts as one of those years and starts checking off the box of some of those skills that they might be looking for.
Yeah. And I think one of the other reasons why I kind of went this direction when I did my search the other day was because I recognize that a lot of these roles are part-time roles. And I know a lot of the students that completed this program are furthering their education. And I think this field within, health workers could be a great place to get that 1 to 3 years experience as you're pursuing that bachelor's degree or that next associate degree or whatever it is that's in your path. So to me, that was my logic when I said, you know what, where can I go and what can I look up and how can I support the students in the CHW program? This is kind of my logic and thought processes and why I went down this path.
Sure. So those are the roles that we've put together this time around. We'll look to be doing another one of these, in a couple of weeks or so, with looking at some additional roles that are out there, maybe some that are really focused on specifically CHW work. But I suspect what you'll see is more of what Aaron had done today, which is starting to dive into some of those other subfields that are out there. And you're finding positions too, share those with us, and then we can even start to think about finding you similar ones to one that you might be interested in.
Yeah, and the other thought process that I had was, maybe introducing everyone to a field or employers that you may not have thought of or considered previous to this conversation, right? And that's something that I hope that, if anything, you understand that there's a lot more things out there possible than what we find on Indeed or the major employers of the world, right? So that's kind of the thought that because some of these are small agencies, small little places, and that's fine. They may have an employee list of 20, but it doesn't mean that it's not a gainful employment and a good organization and a good place to be working. So I hope that is something that is a takeaway for the students.
Yeah, for sure. So, action items for you. Definitely pop into Aaron's office hours. He's got those career search hours that he does every day, Monday through Thursday. There's just that Zoom link that's on the flyer. And then you could also just reach out to either one of us one-on-one to chat about if any of these roles look good for you. But then just also in general, resumes updates, LinkedIn updates, all of that. So,
or even if you just, are interested in a certain niche in this world and you're like, hey, I'm looking for jobs in this area, but I haven't found anything, let us know and we could work together to do some of that research. And maybe I'm aware or Rob's aware of an employer or something that you may not have seen, right? So if you think that you want to work with a certain population, let us know and we could do some research for that too.
Yeah. And again, we are your team for this career search. So you're not alone doing it, and we want to help as much as possible. So reach out. We're here. So be good. I know that tomorrow is Juneteenth, so happy early Juneteenth, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.
Thank you.